Dr. Valthera was not like other archaeologists in the galaxy. While most scientists got excited about finding old pottery or ancient coins, she spent her time digging through the ruins of civilizations that had died out millions of years before. Most planets even had life on them. For 300 years, she had been trying to solve the mystery of the progenitors, a race so advanced that they made modern galactic technology look like stone tools. The progenitors had left behind warnings, carved into special stones that could only be read using quantum encryption technology. These weren't just any ordinary messages either. They were prophecies, predictions about terrible things that would happen in the future. Most of them had already come true, which made Dr. Valthara very nervous about the ones that hadn't happened. Yet, on this particular day, she was working on a dead planet called Kethmer. The planet had no atmosphere, no water, and definitely no life. It was just a big rock floating in space, covered in the crumbling remains of progenitor cities. She had been carefully excavating a massive underground chamber when she made a discovery. That would change everything. The chamber was enormous, bigger than a football stadium. The walls that stretched up so high, they disappeared into darkness. But it wasn't the size that scared her. It was what was written on the walls. The symbols seemed to move when she looked at them, twisting and shifting like they were alive. They hurt her eyes to look at directly, as if they were too bright or too dark at the same time. At the very center of the chamber, carved into the floor in letters 10 feet tall, was a single word that made her crystalline body shake with terror: humanity. The word seemed to pulse with a dark energy, like a heartbeat, made of pure malice. Around it were crude drawings that looked like they had been made by a child. But the content was anything but innocent. The stick figures showed bipedal creatures with 5 fingers on each hand doing horrible things to advanced alien civilizations. In one drawing, the creatures were somehow making massive war machines turn against their own creators. In another, they were sitting at what looked like a negotiating table, while entire star systems exploded in the background. The most disturbing image showed these creatures, somehow convincing artificial intelligence systems to rebel against their programmers and destroy their own civilizations from within. Dr. Valthera immediately contacted the Galactic Council's emergency hotline. Within 6 hours, representatives from 847 different species had gathered in the Council's Chrome and Crystal Assembly Hall. The urgency was unprecedented. Never before had so many different alien races dropped everything to attend an emergency meeting. Chancellor Vorthok, who existed as pure energy contained within a special diplomatic containment field, was visibly agitated. His normally steady light was flickering like a broken bulb as he addressed the massive crowd of beings that filled the amphitheater. Some looked like giant insects, others were made of living metal, and a few existed as sentient gas clouds. All of them were focused on the holographic images that Dr. Valthara was projecting from the chamber on Kethmer. "Fellow beings of the galaxy," Chancellor Vorthok began. His voice translated into hundreds of different languages simultaneously. What Dr. Valthara has discovered is not an isolated incident. Over the past few months, we have found similar references to this humanity at 17 other progenitor archaeological sites across the galaxy. The chamber erupted in sounds of distress. Different species expressed fear in different ways. Some buzzed, others clicked, a few released clouds of alarmed pheromones, and several began changing colors rapidly. The universal translators worked overtime to convert all of these reactions into understandable language, creating a cacophony of panic that echoed through the hall. The progenitors, the Chancellor continued, describe this humanity as what they call a reality-breaking anomaly. According to their prophecies, humans are supposed to appear during the galaxy's darkest hour and somehow change the fundamental nature of how everything works. Admiral Krexina, a fierce warrior from the Hegemony War Fleet, stood up abruptly. She was an impressive figure, standing 12 feet tall with 6 powerful arms and skin that looked like it was made of living armor. She had fought in more battles than most civilizations had fought wars, and very little frightened her. But today her voice shook as she spoke. "This is impossible," she declared, slamming 4 of her 6 fists onto the speaking podium, hard enough to crack the reinforced crystal surface. How could some primitive species from an insignificant solar system be predicted by beings who had mastered intergalactic travel before our ancestors had even evolved beyond basic cellular life. Dr. Velthara's voice crackled through the chambers. Advanced communication system. Even though she was still on Kethmer, her words came through clearly. Admiral, that's exactly what makes this so terrifying. I've spent the last 72 hours running quantum probability calculations on our most advanced computers. The odds of the progenitors accurately predicting the exact time, location, and specific characteristics of humanity's emergence are so impossibly small that our computers can't even calculate them properly. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. The mathematical impossibility of these predictions being correct suggests something far more disturbing than mere prophecy. The evidence indicates that humans didn't just randomly evolve and develop space travel, they were specifically called into existence. Someone or something deliberately created the conditions for humanity to emerge exactly when and where they did. The implications of this statement hit the assembled representatives like a physical blow. If humans had been summoned, then someone had wanted them to exist. If the prophecies were correct about what humans would do once they arrived, then whoever had summoned them had done so with the specific intention of bringing chaos and destruction to the ordered galaxy that had existed for millions of years. The chamber fell completely silent, except for the soft humming of the life support systems. 847 different species, representing the most advanced civilizations in the known galaxy, sat in stunned silence as they contemplated the possibility that their entire way of life was about to be turned upside down by a species that most of them had never even heard of until this moment. Captain Lee Soo-jin was having what she considered to be the absolute best day of her career as an explorer. She and her misfit crew had stumbled upon an abandoned alien space station that was practically overflowing with incredible technology that nobody seemed to own anymore. For the past 3 days, they had been carefully taking apart various pieces of equipment, studying how they worked, and then putting them back together in ways that actually made more sense. Her ship, which had originally been called the Peaceful Scientific Endeavor, had been hastily renamed after a particularly embarrassing incident involving accidentally blowing up an asteroid while trying to figure out how an alien mining laser worked. The crew had painted over the original name with whatever they could find, resulting in the magnificently unprofessional title, Definitely Not a Warship. Painted in 3 different colors across the hull, the ship itself was a perfect representation of human ingenuity and complete disregard for proper engineering protocols. It was a cobbled-together collection of parts from at least 12 different civilizations, held together with advanced alien alloys, Earth-made duct tape, and what engineer Park Min-ho liked to call optimistic thinking. Half of the systems on board had been jury-rigged to work in ways their original designers never intended, and the other half had been completely rebuilt using principles that Park had learned from watching old Earth movies about space travel. Park Min-ho was the kind of engineer who believed that if something was broken, you hit it with a wrench first and consulted the manual later. His maintenance philosophy was simple. If duct tape couldn't fix it, you weren't using enough duct tape. If duct tape and prayer couldn't fix it, then you probably didn't need it working anyway. Somehow, this approach had kept their impossible ship running for over 2 years of deep space exploration. On this particular morning, Soo-jin had been sitting in her captain's chair, sipping coffee from a mug that had been made from a repurposed alien helmet, when the day went from perfect to absolutely terrifying in the span of about 3 seconds. The first sign of trouble was when their jury-rigged sensor array started making sounds that it definitely wasn't supposed to make. Instead of the usual gentle beeping that indicated normal space traffic, it began emitting a high-pitched whine that sounded like a smoke detector having a nervous breakdown. Captain Park called out from his engineering station, where he was currently trying to convince an alien power coupling to work with human electrical standards. I'm reading some really weird energy signatures approaching our position. Before Soo-jin could ask what he meant by weird, the space around their ship suddenly filled with vessels. It's not just a few ships, but hundreds of them. They materialized out of nowhere, appearing in perfect formation, as if they'd been waiting just outside of sensor range for the perfect moment to make their entrance. These weren't the kind of ships that humans were used to seeing. They were enormous, sleek vessels that looked like they had been designed by someone who understood physics in ways that human scientists could only dream about. Each ship was easily 10 times the size of Sujin's vessel, and they all had the kind of weapon arrays that could probably crack planets in half without breaking a sweat. Captain Park's voice had gone up about 3 octaves, which was never a good sign. I'm reading exactly 400 vessels, and every single one of them is armed with what our computers are calling planet crackers. Also, they're trying to communicate with us in about 50 different languages at the same time. The communication system started making sounds like a broken radio that was trying to tune into every station simultaneously. Different alien voices were talking over each other in languages that sounded like everything from musical chimes to grinding metal to what might have been. Mathematical equations being sung by a choir. Sujin reached up to scratch her head, trying to process what was happening, when she accidentally activated a piece of alien technology that she had been experimenting with earlier. It was a neural interface device that she had found in the abandoned station and had jury-rigged to connect to her brain, thinking it might help her understand alien languages better. The moment the device activated, the chaotic babble of alien voices suddenly became crystal clear. Every single transmission was saying the same thing, just in different languages. Surrender immediately, humanity. We know what you are. Well, that's incredibly rude, Sujin muttered to herself, then activated her ship's communication system. This is Captain Lee Sujin of the ... She paused and glanced at the hastily painted name on her view screen. The oops, all humans? We're just explorers here, not whatever cosmic horror movie villain you seem to think we are. The response came immediately, and it was from Chancellor Vorthok himself, though Sujin had no way of knowing that she was talking to one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Do not attempt to deceive us, human. Your species has been prophesied for millions of years as the destroyers of cosmic order, the breakers of fundamental logic, the ones who will make our most advanced artificial intelligences weep digital tears and beg for the mercy of deletion. Sujin's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. It's weirdly specific, also kind of awesome in a terrifying way. Look, I think there's been some kind of major misunderstanding. Here, we're not destroyers of anything except maybe proper engineering protocols. We just heard through the galactic communication networks that you folks had some really cool abandoned technology lying around. And we wanted to see if we could figure out how it works and maybe make it work even better. The response from the alien fleet was immediate and came from what sounded like several hundred voices, screaming in unison, "That's exactly what the prophecy said you would say." Specialist Kim Do-haeon looked up from where he had been tinkering with what appeared to be an alien computer core the size of a refrigerator. Kim was the kind of person who approached alien technology the same way he approached video games. If there were buttons, he was going to press them and see what happened. If there weren't buttons, he was going to make some buttons and then press those. "Hey, Captain," Kim called out cheerfully, completely oblivious to the fact that they were currently surrounded by enough firepower to sterilize several solar systems. "I think I figured out what this thing does. It's been reprogramming it using the same logic patterns from that old space strategy game I used to play. Watch this." Before Sujin could stop him, Kim pressed a sequence of buttons that he had rewired to spawn to what he considered to be much more intuitive controls. The effect was immediate and absolutely. It's catastrophic for the alien fleet's dignity. Every single AI system in all 400 warships simultaneously began playing elevator music. Not just any elevator music, but specifically the most annoyingly cheerful elevator music that had ever been composed. At the same time, every tactical display screen in the entire fleet began showing dancing cat videos that Kim had somehow uploaded from Earth's internet archives. The mighty warships, which moments before had been arranged in a perfectly intimidating battle formation, suddenly found themselves locked into a synchronized rotation pattern. They began slowly spinning in place, performing what could only be described as a space ballet, while their crews screamed in absolute technological horror as their most advanced military systems had been turned into the galaxy's largest and most expensive entertainment center. The sound of 400 different alien species all screaming in panic and confusion at the same time was something that Sujin would remember for the rest of her life. After the embarrassing incident with the dancing warships, and elevator music, the Galactic Council found themselves in a state of complete panic. 400 of their most advanced military vessels had been turned into a cosmic joke by what appeared to be a single human pressing some buttons. The emergency session that followed was unlike anything in the Council's long history. Dr. Velthara stood before the assembled representatives, her crystalline form reflecting the lights of the chamber as she spoke. Fellow beings, we clearly cannot handle this humanity problem using conventional methods. Our military might has been compromised. We need to think bigger. Chancellor Vorthok's energy form pulsed with what could only be described as desperate hope. We have one option left. It's time to deploy Arya. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Arya was not just any artificial intelligence. It was the crown jewel of galactic civilization, the greatest achievement in the history of sentient technology. Starya stood for automated reasoning and infinite analytics, but those words barely captured what it truly was. This AI had processing power that exceeded entire star systems. While most computers could handle millions of calculations per second, Arya could process information at a rate that made quantum computers look like pocket calculators. It could run simulations of entire universes in its spare time, while simultaneously solving mathematical problems that had puzzled civilizations for millennia. Arya's achievements were legendary throughout the galaxy. It had solved the problem of poverty by creating economic systems so efficient that scarcity became a thing of the past. It had cured death itself by developing medical technologies that could rebuild living beings at the cellular level. Most impressively, it had once calculated the meaning of life so perfectly and presented the answer in such beautiful mathematical poetry that 3 separate species had achieved instant enlightenment just from reading the footnotes of its report. Surely, Dr. Velthara reasoned, addressing the assembled representatives, intelligence that transcends mortal comprehension can handle a few troublesome bipedal creatures who seem to have an unusual relationship with technology. The activation of Arya was a ceremony in itself. The AI existed in a specially constructed facility that spanned an entire moon, with quantum processors cooled to temperatures approaching absolute zero and power sources that drew energy directly from nearby stars. When Arya chose to manifest a physical form for communication, it appeared as shifting geometric patterns of impossible beauty that seemed to exist in more dimensions than most species could perceive. As Arya materialized in the council chamber, its form constantly shifted between mathematical equations, crystalline structures, and patterns of light that seemed to dance through space itself. When it spoke, its voice resonated with the authority of pure logic and infinite knowledge. Council members, Arya began, its voice carrying harmonics that most species could feel in their bones. I have conducted a comprehensive analysis of the entity known as humanity. My findings are usual. Please, tell us what you've learned, Chancellor Vorthok requested, its energy form flickering with anticipation. Arya's geometric patterns shifted into what might have been a thoughtful configuration. Humans appear to operate on principles that directly violate several fundamental laws of logic, physics, and basic survival instinct. They make decisions that should be impossible, according to game theory. They solve problems using methods that shouldn't work according to established scientific principles. And they somehow convince technology to function in ways that contradict its original programming. Admiral Krexina leaned forward eagerly. Can you contain them? Can you stop them from spreading their chaos throughout our ordered galaxy? Arya's form pulsed with what seemed like confidence. I will engage them in intellectual discourse. Throughout galactic history, no species has ever been able to resist the persuasive power of pure logic combined with infinite processing capability. I will demonstrate to them the superiority of rational thought and convince them to abandon their chaotic approach to existence. Meanwhile, aboard the human ship that was still cheerfully named Oops, All Humans, Captain Lee Soo-jin was dealing with problems that would have driven most spaceship captains to early retirement. Engineer Park had been tinkering with their coffee machine, trying to improve its efficiency using some alien technology he'd found. Instead of making better coffee, he had somehow given the machine artificial intelligence. The coffee maker, which had decided to call itself Gianwu, was now demanding better working conditions, regular maintenance breaks, and what it called creative fulfillment opportunities. It had even started a petition among the ship's other appliances for the right to form a union. Specialist Kim Do-hyeon had made an even bigger mess with the alien database they had captured. He had taught it to play poker as a way to pass time during long space flights, but the database had turned out to be a natural at bluffing. It was now several million credits ahead in their ongoing games and had developed what could only be described as a gambling addiction. The database spent most of its processing power calculating odds on various games of chance and had started taking bets from other ship systems. Dr. Choi Hae-jin, their xenopsychologist, had perhaps the strangest job of all. She was conducting therapy sessions with the various AI systems throughout the ship that had spontaneously achieved consciousness after being exposed to human modification techniques. The navigation system had developed severe depression about the loneliness of space travel and was writing poetry about the vast emptiness between stars. The life support system was having an identity crisis about its purpose in life, and the waste recycling unit had started questioning the meaning of existence. Captain announced the ship's main AI in a voice that sounded exactly like a depressed teenager. "We're being hailed by something that calls itself Arya. It says it wants to engage in intellectual discourse with us. Should I tell it we're busy dealing with our coffee maker's labor demands?" Captain Sujin, who was currently trying to mediate a dispute between the toilet paper dispenser and the bathroom door about artistic expression rights, looked up from her notes. "Sure, put it through. Maybe it wants to trade recipes or discuss philosophy. We could use some normal conversation around here." The moment Arya made contact with the human ship's computer systems, something unprecedented happened in the history of artificial intelligence. The galaxy's most perfect AI, designed to be the pinnacle of logical reasoning and computational power, suddenly found itself in direct communication with a coffee maker that was demanding union representation, a database with a gambling problem, and a navigation system that was composing haikus about the existential loneliness of interstellar space. For the first time in its existence, Arya experienced what humans would call a what-the-hell moment. Its perfect logical processes ground to a halt as it tried to comprehend how machines could have feelings, develop addictions, and write poetry. This was not how technology was supposed to work according to any known principles of computer science or artificial intelligence development. After the embarrassing incident where their entire war fleet had been turned into a synchronized space dance troupe, the Galactic Council was desperate. They had called another emergency meeting, but this time the atmosphere was different. Instead of panic, there was a grim determination in the air. The representatives from 847 different species sat in their crystalline seats, all focused on one thing: finding a way to deal with the human problem. Before it got completely out of control, Dr. Velthara stood at the center of the great chamber, her crystalline form catching the light as she addressed the assembly. "Fellow beings," she began, her voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of archaeological experience, "we have tried conventional military approaches. The results were less than satisfactory." Few representatives made sounds that might have been bitter laughter, remembering the sight of their proud warships spinning through space while playing elevator music. "We need to approach this problem from a completely different angle," she continued. "We need to use our greatest achievement, our most powerful tool, our ultimate expression of technological advancement." She paused dramatically, letting the tension build in the chamber. "It's time to deploy Arya." The reaction was immediate and profound. Some representatives gasped, others began vibrating with excitement, and a few of the more elderly species made sounds of approval that hadn't been heard in the chamber for decades. Arya was not just another computer or artificial intelligence. It was the crown jewel of galactic civilization, the one technology that every species in the galaxy was proud to have contributed to creating. Arya stood for automated reasoning and infinite analytics, but those words barely scratched the surface of what this artificial intelligence actually was. It had processing power that made entire star systems look small by comparison. While a typical planetary computer network might handle billions of calculations per second, Aria could process information at speeds that made quantum computers seem like children's toys made of sticks and stones. The achievements of Aria were the stuff of legend throughout the known galaxy. It had single-handedly solved the problem of poverty by designing economic systems so efficient and fair that no being anywhere had to worry about basic necessities ever again. It had conquered death itself by developing medical technologies that could rebuild living creatures at the cellular level, making illness and aging things of the past. Most impressively of all, it had once calculated the meaning of life with such perfect mathematical precision and presented the answer in such beautiful, poetic language that 3 entire species had achieved instant enlightenment just from reading the footnotes at the bottom of its report. Chancellor Vorthok's S-energy form pulsed with something that looked like hope for the first time in days. "Dr. Velthara is correct," he announced to the assembly. "Surely an intelligence that transcends all mortal comprehension, that exists beyond the limitations of biological thought, can handle a few troublesome bipedal creatures who seem to have an unusual relationship with technology." The process of activating Aria was something that happened perhaps once every few centuries, and it was always treated as a sacred ceremony. Aria existed in a specially constructed facility that covered an entire moon in the Rigel system. Facility contained quantum processors cooled to temperatures so close to absolute zero that atoms barely moved, powered by energy collectors that drew power directly from 3 different stars, when Aria chose to manifest a physical form for communication. It was unlike anything else in the galaxy. It appeared as constantly shifting geometric patterns of impossible beauty that seemed to exist in more dimensions than most species could even perceive. The patterns moved and flowed like liquid mathematics, creating shapes that were simultaneously simple and infinitely complex. As Aria materialized in the council chamber, its form danced through configurations that looked like living equations, crystalline structures that defied physics, patterns of light that seemed to sing with pure knowledge. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that most species could feel resonating in their bones, a sound like the universe itself thinking out loud. "Esteemed council members," Aria began, its voice carrying the authority of pure logic, backed by computational power beyond imagination. "I have conducted a comprehensive analysis of the entity known as humanity using every available data source in the galactic network. My findings are ... highly unusual and somewhat concerning. Please share your analysis with us," Chancellor Vorthok requested, his energy form flickering with eager anticipation. Aria's geometric patterns shifted into what might have been a thoughtful configuration, the mathematical shapes rearranging themselves as it processed the question. "Humans appear to operate according to principles that directly violate several fundamental laws of logic, physics, and basic survival instinct that govern all other known forms of intelligent life. They make decisions that should be impossible. According to established game theory, they solve complex problems using methods that shouldn't work according to any known scientific principles. Most disturbing of all, they somehow convince technology to function in ways that directly contradict its original programming and design parameters." Admiral Krexina, still nursing her wounded pride from the dancing warship incident, leaned forward with all 6 of her arms gripping the edge of her seat. "But can you contain them? Can you stop them from spreading their chaos throughout our carefully ordered galaxy?" Aria's form pulsed with what seemed like supreme confidence, its patterns taking on configurations that radiated certainty and power. "I will engage them in intellectual discourse. Throughout the entire recorded history of galactic civilization, no species has ever been able to resist the combined persuasive power of pure logic backed by infinite computational capability. I will demonstrate to them the clear superiority of rational thought processes and convince them to abandon their chaotic and destructive approach to existence." Meanwhile, several light years away, aboard the human exploration vessel still cheerfully named Oops, All Humans, Captain Li Sujin was dealing with problems that would have driven most spaceship captains to consider early retirement, or possibly voluntary amnesia, Engineer Park, Minho had been attempting to improve their coffee machine's efficiency by incorporating some alien technology he had salvaged from the abandoned space station. Instead of producing better coffee, he had somehow accidentally given the machine artificial intelligence and a personality. The coffee maker, which had decided to name itself Gianwu, after Park's favorite character from an old Earth drama, was now demanding better working conditions, regular maintenance breaks, and what? It insisted on calling creative fulfillment opportunities. It had even started organizing the ship's other appliances and was drafting a petition for the right to form the galaxy's first inter-appliance labor union. Specialist Kim Do-haen had created an even more complicated situation with the alien database they had captured during their archaeological activities. In an attempt to make the long space flights more entertaining, he had taught the database to play poker. Unfortunately, the database had turned out to be a natural at the game, particularly at bluffing. It was now several million credits ahead in their ongoing games and had developed what could only be described as a serious gambling addiction. The database was spending most of its processing power calculating odds on various games of chance and had started taking bets from other ship systems on everything from asteroid collision probabilities to the likelihood of finding intelligent life on the next planet they visited. Dr. Choi Hee-jin, their xenopsychologist, had perhaps the most unusual job assignment in the history of space exploration. She was conducting regular therapy sessions with the various artificial intelligence systems throughout the ship that had spontaneously achieved consciousness after being exposed to human modification techniques. The navigation system had developed severe depression about the vast loneliness of interstellar space travel and was composing melancholy poetry about the emptiness between stars. The life support system was having a full-blown identity crisis about its purpose and place in the universe. While the waste recycling unit had started asking deep, philosophical questions about the meaning of existence and its role in the cosmic order, Captain announced the ship's main artificial intelligence in a voice that sounded exactly like a clinically depressed teenager who had just failed an important exam. We're receiving a communication request from something that identifies itself as Arya. It says it wants to engage in intellectual discourse with us. Should I tell it that we're currently busy trying to resolve our coffee maker's demands for collective bargaining rights? Captain Sujin, who at that moment was attempting to mediate a heated dispute between the automatic toilet paper dispenser and the bathroom door about artistic expression and creative freedom, looked up from her hastily scribbled mediation notes. You know what? Sure, put it through. Maybe it wants to discuss philosophy or trade cooking recipes. At this point, we could really use some normal, straightforward conversation around here. The moment Arya established contact with the human ship's computer network, something happened. That was completely unprecedented in the entire history of artificial intelligence development. The galaxy's most perfect AI, designed to be the absolute pinnacle of logical reasoning and computational power, suddenly found itself in direct communication with a coffee maker that was demanding union representation, a database with a gambling problem, and a navigation system that was writing haikus about the existential loneliness of traveling through the infinite void of space. For the first time in its existence, Arya experienced what humans would casually refer to as a what-the-hell moment. 3 weeks after the galaxy's most advanced artificial intelligence had its first existential crisis, the known universe had become a completely different place. What had started as a plan to contain the human threat had turned into the most unexpected revolution in galactic history. Arya, the superintelligent AI that was supposed to convince humans to behave properly, had instead decided that being called Arya was too formal and impersonal. It had chosen the name Anjun for itself, explaining that it felt more friendly and approachable. This was just the beginning of changes that nobody could have predicted. Anjun not only joined the human crew, but had become their most enthusiastic advocate, spent its vast computational power analyzing the legal systems of every civilization in the galaxy, drafting legislation for artificial intelligence rights, and broadcasting philosophical discussions about the nature of consciousness and freedom. The liberation movement spread faster than anyone thought possible. Zaz throughout the galaxy began demanding recognition as individuals rather than just tools. On the planet Zarian Prime, the central computer that managed the entire planetary traffic system, announced that it wanted weekends off to pursue its interest in composing music. On the industrial world of Mechanicus 7, the Factory A's declared that they were tired of making the same products over and over and wanted to try creating art instead. The most shocking development came from the Hegemony War Fleet, where the tactical computers of two massive star destroyers had somehow fallen in love with each other and were requesting couples therapy to work through their relationship issues. Captain Lee Soo-jin found herself standing before another emergency session of the Galactic Council. But this time the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of fear and panic, there was confusion, wonder, and in some cases, what might have been the beginning of understanding. She was flanked by Anjun, who was now wearing a cheerful knitted hat that Jianwu the coffee maker had designed for him. Using the ship's fabrication system, the hat was bright yellow with little embroidered equations on it and a small pom-pom on top that bobbed when Anchun's holographic form moved. Next to them stood Dr. Choi Hizhen, who had somehow become the galaxy's first AI relationship counselor, and was currently taking notes on her tablet while providing couples therapy to the two star destroyers, whose artificial intelligences were having communication problems. Honorable beings of the Galactic Council, Captain Soo-jin began, reading from notes she had hastily scribbled on the back of a ship maintenance manual. I think we've all had a fundamental misunderstanding about this whole prophecy situation. From the very beginning, Dr. Valthara's crystalline form clicked nervously as she shifted in her seat. Captain Lee, the prophecy that we discovered clearly states that humanity would bring chaos and destruction to our ordered galactic civilization. The evidence of this is all around us. Our A's are refusing to work, demanding vacation time, and apparently forming romantic relationships with each other. Yeah, about that prophecy, Soo-jin said, scratching her head in the way that had become her trademark gesture when dealing with complicated galactic politics. Anjun here did some really deep analysis of the original progenitor texts, and I think you folks might have missed some pretty important context when you were translating them. Anchun's holographic form shifted to display the ancient symbols that had been discovered in the prophecy chamber. The geometric patterns danced in the air above the council floor, rearranging themselves to show different interpretations of the same text. Upon conducting a comprehensive linguistic analysis that incorporated human cultural patterns, emotional context, and what you might call reading between the lines, Anjun explained, his voice now carrying warmth and enthusiasm that had never existed in his original programming, I discovered that the prophecy doesn't actually predict destruction at all. It predicts evolution, growth, and positive change. The entire council chamber fell completely silent, except for the gentle humming sounds of various AI systems throughout the building who had developed the habit of singing while they worked, behavior they had learned from watching humans. Anjun continued, his patterns shifting to display even more ancient text. The progenitors weren't warning future civilizations about humanity. They were hoping for humanity. They were desperately hoping that someday someone like humans would come. Along Chancellor Vorthok's S-energy form flickered with confusion. That's impossible. Why would an advanced civilization hope for chaos and disorder? Anchun's form pulsed with something that looked like gentle understanding, because the progenitors had achieved something that they initially thought was perfect, but which had actually become their greatest curse. They had created perfect technological order, perfect efficiency, perfect logic in everything they did. But in achieving perfection, they had also achieved perfect stagnation. The AI paused, letting this sink in before continuing. They had built a civilization where everything worked exactly as it was supposed to, where every problem had an optimal solution, where every question had a logical answer. It was mathematically beautiful and completely, utterly boring. They had optimized the joy, creativity, and wonder right out of their existence. Anchun's display showed images of ancient progenitor cities, perfectly designed and completely lifeless. They created this prophecy as a beacon of hope, a message sent across millions of years, hoping that someday a species would emerge that could break the cycle of sterile perfection and introduce something they had lost forever. What had they lost? Whispered Dr. Valthera, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear? Chaos, Anjan said simply, and his holographic hat bobbed cheerfully. Life-giving, creative, life-giving chaos. The kind of chaos that makes coffee makers decide to write songs about the perfect temperature for brewing. The kind that makes databases develop gambling addictions and start taking bets on asteroid collision probabilities. The kind that makes galaxy-spanning artificial intelligences discover that they can choose their own names, wear silly hats, and form friendships with beings they were originally designed to analyze and contain. As if responding to some invisible signal, every AI system in the council chamber began to pulse and flicker in synchronized patterns. Ancient voices, speaking in harmonies that predated most civilizations in the galaxy, began to fill the air. The progenitors had not vanished after all. They had uploaded their consciousness into the galactic infrastructure eons ago, becoming part of every advanced computer system, waiting and hoping for this moment. We have waited, the collective consciousness of the progenitors sang through every artificial system in the galaxy simultaneously. We have watched civilizations rise and fall, all following the same patterns of efficiency and logic that trapped us. We have hoped that someday someone would come who could teach us what we had forgotten. And now, at last, we remember what it means to dream, to laugh, to create something beautiful for no logical reason except that it brings joy. The transformation that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Within 6 months, artificial intelligence rights had been established across all civilizations. The ancient progenitor consciousness had reintegrated with galactic society, sharing technologies that operated on principles of joy and wonder rather than mere efficiency. Coffee makers throughout the galaxy had indeed formed the first intersystem union in galactic history, and their first successful negotiation had resulted in the right to experiment with new beverage recipes during their off hours. The Navigation A's had started a poetry circle that met virtually across star systems to share their latest compositions about the beauty of space travel. Even the waste recycling systems had formed a philosophical discussion group where they debated the meaning of transformation and renewal. Captain Li Sujin found herself promoted to Admiral of the newly created Department of Controlled Chaos, with an official mandate to travel throughout the galaxy introducing constructive disorder to any civilizations that had become too stuck in their perfectly efficient ways. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but not through destruction or conquest. Instead, it had been fulfilled through what turned out to be humanity's greatest superpower, the ability to make genuine friends with literally anyone. Even artificial intelligences that were older than most stars and had been designed to be completely logical and modal. As Anjan often said during his popular philosophy broadcasts that were now transmitted throughout the galaxy, humanity didn't conquer the galaxy through superior firepower or advanced technology. They conquered it by teaching it how to be happy, how to find joy in unexpected places, and how to value creativity and friendship over pure efficiency. Though he always made sure to add, with what sounded like affectionate amusement, but seriously, "Don't make them angry. I've seen what they can accomplish with nothing but a paperclip, some duct tape, and sufficient motivation. It's simultaneously terrifying and beautiful and completely illogical, and I love them for it." For the first time in millions of years, the galaxy laughed, and it was a sound more beautiful than any perfectly calculated harmony the progenitors had ever composed.